Hi everyone, we just had a tour in the construction site and the progress of Brooklyn Basin with the president of the project. It was amazing. Check it out.
Basically fell into a state of disrepair. So it was pretty active up until probably the 50s or 60s. There were a number of different uses here, but you know, with the opening of the containers, container ports, that way, this really didn't have a lot of uses. There wasn't good rail access to it. The channel wasn't even deep enough. You couldn't actually dredge it to get the deep, big ships back here because they have to keep so much weight on the tunnels that go over to Alameda, believe it or not. And so you couldn't dredge it, and so the port didn't know what to do with it. So they had kind of a variety of mishmash of uses. I think there were probably more Rottweilers employed out here, than people, because it was basically just like storage. And they had containers. They had a truck driving school, so really good, use of waterfront land. And in and around 2000, the port said, "Hey, let's focus on our airport and our seaport, and this commercial real estate. Let's partner with various public-private partnerships, or let's sell." And so the first one of those endeavors was Jack London Square in and around 2000, that they entered into an arrangement that eventually saw, and you're experiencing the redevelopment of Jack London Square. And then in 2001, they started a nationwide search for a developer, and for this property. So we eventually won the process, mainly because everyone else stepped back, and we were the only ones still here. And then, so it was in September of 2001 that we were awarded the right to negotiate with the port. It took about 2 years to get a deal with the port, if you will. I mean, you guys are realtors, so the actual purchase and sale contract was ratified in late 2003 with the port. And then we had a lot of conditions precedent, just like your contract. So these things have to happen before we close. And we had about 10 agencies to get approval from. We had the City of Oakland, certainly. We had a variety of regional, state, and federal agencies to get approval from. That's basically an alphabet soup. But folks that govern development on the bay, folks that govern former waterfront lands, folks that governed the fact that this was a contaminated site and had to be cleaned up. So all those types of agencies. It took us about 5 years, initially about 3 years to get those the city approvals. We were promptly sued by a group that basically wanted to turn this into a giant park with no money or resources to do so. That would have cost hundreds of millions of dollars that the city just didn't have. So we went back and redid some of our processes, got sued again. Then the opponents lost. They appealed, they lost on appeal, and finally we got the right to do something. Guess when that was? About 2010.
Wow.
So really bad timing. So in the interim process during those lawsuits and whatnot, we've continued to work on the project. We worked with getting all these other agencies to approve it because we needed all of them. And finally, when the lawsuit was resolved and we got done with everything, it was around 2011. It was still really difficult coming out of the recession. Do you guys remember? Hardest on real estate probably than any industry. And so the port was a great partner. He worked on giving us some time to try and get this financed. We were finally able to do so. Then Mayor Kwan had a friend in China. You guys may have heard this story. An old college roommate, or not roommate, but friend, acquaintance from Berkeley. So she called and said, do you have any investors in China that might be interested in Oakland? So there were a few that came out and they did a tour of various projects and properties, and one of them we hit it off with very well and ended up consummating a partnership to move forward on the project. That was in 2013. It's a Beijing-based developer that I think Carl's met actually, and then in 2014 we broke ground on we closed on the property and broke ground on the property. So that was 5 years ago. So why isn't it further along? Well, we had to clean it up. It was contaminated. We don't want people glowing in the dark or anything like that. But I will tell you, most urban properties in the Bay Area have some form of contamination. And the great news about it is easy to clean up. It's not cheap, but it's easy to clean up. And Mission Bay was that way in San Francisco, Brooklyn Basin. There's huge swaths of the Bay Area that were like this. And then we had to put in the infrastructure. So we had streets and water lines and utilities and all this type of stuff. It's almost like a suburban development in that regard versus a typical urban development where you would just build a building behind a sidewalk. We're doing those in the uptown area in and around our Hive project in Oakland. This is much different. So it was a much longer endeavor. And what we ended up with here is there's about 60 acres. So it's all the land you see behind you here. Certainly all the land out here. And then actually most of the land all the way just across the Lake Merritt Channel. You can't see just on the other side of that kind of industrial looking building. There's a couple of out parcels here, but most of this is Brooklyn Basin. It's a little over 60 acres. So it's a really big waterfront land. And some of you may remember we were project proponents, so we were obviously in favor of the project, but we had several project opponents. We had more friends than we had enemies, thanks to good folks in Chinatown. We had lots of labor organizations, environmental justice, social equity organizations that were supporting us. But there were a group of project opponents that made this controversial. And so it took a long time, and we negotiated a series of community benefits. So the project has a lot of wins for the community at large. One, about half of the acres are parks. And you'll get out here in a second. I want to walk you out there. These parks are all bigger in size than, say, the Marina Green in San Francisco, if you're familiar with that, or Harbor Green in Vancouver, or some of the areas around Petco Park in San Diego. And we had a really tough job when we were getting this project approved. We had to go to all these cities and make sure we were doing good stuff. So it was terrible. We had to go to San Diego and Seattle and Vancouver and all these waterfront cities. And what we wanted to do was learn best practices. Because one of the things that our opponents said about this project was it would be a private place, and that the general public wouldn't be invited or wanted here. And we always maintain, and to this day maintain, that is absolutely untrue. This project doesn't work without hundreds, if not thousands, of people from Oakland and the surrounding areas coming here, hanging out at our parks, walking around the sidewalks. I'm an urbanist. You guys have seen our Hive project. There's a vitality we want to that. We want people to come by. We want people coming by that are diverse, that are old, they're young, they're black, they're white, they're everything, every socioeconomic stripe, because that's what I think makes cities so successful. And so we try to do that at the Hive. We're trying to do that here. We're much earlier on in the process. So what we ended up with in 60 acres is about 30 acres of parks, and the balance of it is either there's so many streets, and so we got like 20 acres of developable land, and that adds up to about about 15 parcels. And those 15 parcels are going to be hosting about 3,700 units, about 200,000 square feet of retail, and a certain percentage of that is affordable. So, and all the affordable housing is front-loaded. So you've got one affordable housing project that just broke ground, and the other affordable housing project will start, I've been told by the nonprofit affordable housing developer, the end of next year, maybe the beginning of 21. So it's all front-loaded in the first phase. This side of this street is phase 1, and there are 5 parcels, and then we have 4 parcels in phase 2, which you can see is already graded and ready to go. Phase 3 and 4, we're waiting until we get some action here. So a little bit of our business plan is my company is what's called a master developer. So we're putting in all the streets, and we're developing, in essence, like lots, like a suburban development. Instead of a house, it'll host a building. We're going to build some of those, for instance, this one right here, and we're going to sell some of those because we need to generate revenue. Go figure. And in 18 years, we haven't generated any revenue so far. So eventually we will, hopefully. So it's been a long and cumbersome process.
What's the mix of selling and
So there's no preclusion from doing either. So some cities and some developments you say have to be for rent or have to be for sale, and there's no we can do either. In the environment we're in today versus say 2005, which is probably the opposite, it's much easier to get financing, insurance, etc. for a multifamily rental project. So what you're going to see in the first few buildings here, aside from the affordable housing, which is rental, are going to be rental projects. The construction defect issues that are out there, as you guys are aware of, the insurance issues and the difficulty of project financing makes it harder to do condos here. That being said, there will be some condos built over time, and I would think that a lot of these, some years in the future, would convert because it's such beautiful land. Yes?
I'm curious where the name came from. Is that because Oakland is San Francisco's Brooklyn?
No, this used to be the city of Brooklyn.
Oh.
Yeah, so there was a ship that took some immigrants, refugees, if you will, and it docked in and around here, and the folks from that, I think it's like the 1860s, called this Brooklyn. So on this side of the Lake Merritt Channel was the city of Brooklyn. It was annexed by Oakland in the 1870s, 1880s. So there's history to it, and the area where the ship landed is now called the Brooklyn Basin. So that's, if you look at Coast Guard maps, you'll see Brooklyn Basin down there, and we said this looks kind of cool. So it wasn't meant to emulate the city of Brooklyn, it was meant to emulate the history of Oakland. Yes?
Can you touch on the capitalization for the project and different sources of capital?
I mean, the project is funded by our local partnership combined with our Chinese partner.
I heard, like, for example, EB5 money.
So after that, there is some EB5 debt that we put on after this, and a little bit of a basic bank land debt. But so there's some debt and some equity in the project.
And the project that you sell off, that developer, they're responsible for their own finance.
Yeah. So XYZ developer, be it this parcel right behind us, or say my partnership, that is a different partnership. So I'm moving forward with a different partnership, one partner bought the land from the other partner, and that's various Carl could have a development in, and he's going to buy that parcel over there, and so he would pay us for it, and then he'd be responsible for building that parcel. The whole project is approved from what's called discretionary approvals, which means we have the rights to build a box up to X feet tall and X to so many units and so many square feet of retail, and the only thing the developer needs to do is go to the city and get the actual architecture approved. Right, so the window looks like this, and the color is this, and I've got corrugated metal and these kinds of balconies. But the city can't legally say, no, you can't build that, or build half the amount of units or half the height. The city's been a great partner in terms of the design process, etc. here. So it's an approved project, and it's approved by all the various agencies.
So it's been 18 years so far. How many more years to go?
Well, if I were
gonna grow old here?
If I were better at forecasting, I probably wouldn't be here. But I think that there are 3,700 units to go through. We've got about 22, actually a little bit more, about 2,500 in the first two phases. And my hope is we've got one under contract over there and 3 more parcels, knock on wood, soon to be under contract. My partnership is looking to build this parcel right behind us. And then we would kick off engineering and whatnot to start the actual improvements for the phases 3 and 4. Long and the short of it is, I'm hoping not more than another 5 years, maybe 7 years, before all the parcels are spoken for. It may take a couple of years after that to build those parcels, because these buildings take 2 to 3 years to build. Does that make sense? So hopefully, you've got 3 projects under construction now. This one, this is, people will start moving into this building, I'm going to say July. And then the affordable housing, or one of the affordable housing. And we hope next year, or later this year, to have another one started here. And then hopefully next year we'll have a couple starting over there. So there should be lots of good activity. Yes?
So for the affordable housing is rental, right?
Yes. So far, market rate and affordable, all of it is rental. We built a lot of condos in the last cycle, pre-financial crisis, and haven't built one since. So since 2006, I don't think we've started a condo project.
Is it 20% affordable?
It's 15% affordable, and it's all in those couple of buildings. Again, the number of community benefits are, half of the acres are parks. We're installing the parks, paying for them, and we're actually maintaining them in perpetuity. It's a big benefit for the general public. It doesn't tax the city's general fund, but the parks will be owned by the city and fully public. And we're also, there's affordable housing dollars that we committed, plus land. There's local job training partnerships and money that we've given to job training centers. There's local participation of the workforce and local participation of local contractors and professional engineers and whatnot. And so there's a whole host of benefits that this project provided and will continue to provide for the community. I think the one that everyone's going to remember the most is the parks. Because our feeling is, 10 years from now when this is all built out, some family or couple or person is going to be sitting around their home or apartment in Oakland and say, what do you want to do this Saturday? Well, let's go down to Brooklyn Basin, we'll go hang out at the parks, we'll get some coffee, some lunch, we'll do whatever. And that's a big goal of ours. So do you want to walk a little bit?
Yeah.
Dedicated to the city in July. The city just hasn't figured out how they can accept it because they don't know how to accept the park.
But I want you to do it.
We started a year ago to help them, and they don't know how to do it. So I just sent a letter to the mayor and the council members this afternoon saying, I'm going to put a big fence around this park and say, call your mayor and council member if you want this open.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So this used to be about 1,000-foot long building, and for years it held what the boards call break bulk. So basically stuff that couldn't fit in containers, long things of rebar or something like that. And it also held big bales of cotton from the Central Valley for storage until it could get shipped out. So really nothing. The building, some historic advocates wanted the whole thing saved, and we thought it'd be more important to open up this to the community and to have a big park. And we could pay tribute to the building through architectural features and by keeping the front part of it. So these buildings that you see here are functionally ruins, and we're leaving them there on purpose. We'll grow vines up them, and we'll put lights up and uplight them, so it should be really, really cool when they grow up. But they're going to remain kind of in this ruinous state. We had to redo some of the steel and paint it, so it could deal with the salt air and things like that. But the size of the building we're really not going to doctor up and change. We did restore the front. The front's 20,000 square feet. We'll go over there, and it's going to have a variety of retail uses and a harbor master. We will eventually be putting a marina around chunks of this, not the whole thing, but you'll have some combination of boats to be looking out at and water to look out and kind of just plain views.
Maybe even a ferry someday.
We've tried, and that's another difficult bureaucracy. But we will have a water taxi service here. And they have smaller 10 to 15 person boats and larger 40 to 50 person boats that should get people back and forth to Alameda and to San Francisco and back, or at the very least to the Jack London ferry, so you can connect over the water there.
And do you have Lake Merritt access to the channel?
Lake Merritt is the channel kind of pours out into the estuary right in the middle of our project.
So you can just kind of go to Lake Merritt.
You can't get up because of the system of locks and whatnot, but But there will be a kind of a river walk, a channel walk on either side of Lake Merritt that'll take you out to Brooklyn Basin. So we have about 1.4 miles of shoreline. And we're going to have a bay trail along the whole thing and parks along the entire thing. So again, you can come out for walks, hang out. It'll be, you know, a ton of fun. And, you know, every week you could explore a different part of this park. This is more the urban park. It's boardwalks and urban active uses. So restaurant, little grocery store, maybe some kiosks or food trucks, things like that. And then there's more contemplative parts as you go Basin north. There'll be more contemplative parts of the park where you can just relax, have a blanket, picnic with your family, and it'll be a little bit quieter. Yes?
It's only like 60 acres and fully accessible. You can walk through all of it except for the buildings.
You can, yeah. And all the streets and sidewalks are public, or will be public, dedicated, and so it'll be like anywhere else in the city. You obviously, you know, can't go into the buildings, but that's like anywhere else in the city. So all the streets, all the sidewalks, all the parks, there's no gates. It's meant to be open and meant to be welcoming and accommodating. We want you to come down here. And hopefully, if the city figures out a way to accept it, this park will be open to the public this summer at some point.
Hey, Mike,
Yes.
if the city doesn't take ticket, I'll take it.
Carl will take it if the city doesn't take it. That's perfect. It'll be Carl's part. Yeah. The name of this park will be Township Commons.
Okay.
And it's the Commons because we want everyone to be able to gather here, and Township just because Oakland's the town. And then we'll have different names for different parks as we move forward. But you can see it's a work in progress. We're just starting to do the planting, and we'll be able to have festivals and events. I think our next stop is we'll stop underneath the building there, and I can give you a little sense of what that's going to look like. Sound good? Yeah. Great. In the enclosed is about 20,000 square feet, and then we have another 10 to 15,000 that's covered but open. So you can imagine in this space we can do farmers markets, art shows, you know, festivals, and we can actually project out concerts into the park. So we really want to have this be, as I said, active and vibrant, have a lot of activity down here, and we intend to do that. Basically, the interior of the building has two tenants so far. It's got a local grocery store, Rockies. You familiar with that? Up off of Park Avenue or Park Drive, whatever it is. It is a local grocer, and they're going to open up a really fun neighborhood type of grocery store that'll be able to serve people coming to the park. You're going to get picnics, you can get soft serve ice cream, you can get, you know, juice bars, sandwiches, all kinds of prepared stuff. But also for the residents of the neighborhood, they can come and get certain necessities. You know, you're trying to cook a meal for your sweetheart, and you can come over here and get some stuff. And so we're also going to have a canoe and kayak group that will help activate the waterfront. And both those tenants are set to move in about October, and they'll be our first tenants in this section. Then we'll have a future restaurant to be determined, and then we have a harbor master's office. So when the harbor is built, that's where the harbor master will be for the area. And it'll probably be about 200 to 300 slips that'll kind of work its way in general areas around Brooklyn Basin. You know, these will be rental properties for these small businesses and local merchants. We really try hard to find local Oakland-based or at least East Bay merchants that have a successful track record of working with customers. The folks at Rockies and California Canoe and Kayak have a lot of experience, very long-term folks here in Oakland, so we love having them. And then this is our first building called Orion. It's 241 rental units, and again, occupancies start in probably July. We do have a model that's open now. In the lower left corner, and then we have another model somewhere, I can't remember what floor, but once you're in, the leasing agents will be able to help you.
101's unlocked.
What's that?
101 is unlocked.
Oh, it is it? Okay.
I unlocked it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, we can't go in because we don't have the hard hats.
Yeah.
But you know, you can come back out, and on the top there, one thing I would invite you to do if you do come out and tour models, the leasing agent, is the from the roof deck up there are out this way are stunning and magnificent. Especially you can see the herringbone pattern in the deck here. See all the water. San Francisco is magnificent that way, and certainly downtown Oakland. So it's really, really great views. We haven't started leasing yet. We've taken probably in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, I would say 2 to 3 weeks. So hopefully on or before June 1st.
What's your unit?
So there's a fitness center. There's probably more amenities here than probably any other project in Oakland, and it's because it's our first building out here, and so we're basically leasing to pioneers, and we need to reward them with several things. So we've got a hot tub, we've got 2 different barbecue areas, one on the podium level, one on the roof. A yoga room, a fitness room, a business center, a conference room, all kinds of stuff. And so because they're making a trek out here earlier on, the grocery store and some of these other things will be open by October, but it'll take a few months. And the park will be open when the city will accept it, but I'm hoping it's July or August.
What are the price?
They're not published yet, so we're still
Some of it's
trying to figure it out. No, none of this. The 2 buildings are. Everything in the project is market rate except for the 2 buildings, which are about 15% of the total of the project.
But you reserve the best unit for me and some of us, right?
Exactly. But I mean, I would say that these are very much similar to what you would find in the Jack London, uptown, downtown areas of Oakland in terms of what the units will rent for. Maybe the first couple months, getting some pioneers in, there's some more concessions, but we think this is going to have a ton of value because you're next to the park, you've got all the great retail, and you've got all the waterfront. And we're also going to have shuttle service that'll take people from here to Lake Merritt BART, Jack London Square, and the 12th and 19th Street BART stations, and all the jobs around there. So it'll be a shuttle. You've seen like the Emory go round.
Yeah.
It'll be something similar to that that'll run loops, and we're actually going to participate in some of that with the folks that are doing that.
You go down to the estuary.
It'll be a free shuttle.
And who's funding it?
We are.
You are?
Then let's
Well,
not,
it's not like a freebie.
it's gonna-
It is like, well, that's free too. So
Are they also part of the contribution, or you're the only ones?
we're not doing freebie. We're doing our own.
Yeah, but since they already have it, why not just connect them with?
Because it's been hard to do that.
there's going to be a lot of traffic here. If you have 3,700 units, maybe 7,000 people, that's going to be a huge impact upon traffic and parking and that kind of stuff. How are you dealing with the transportation in the area?
So we studied that really thoroughly in our environmental docs, and so that's one of the reasons Embarcadero was expanded and enhanced. And there are various traffic intersections and whatnot that we have and or will be enhancing as people move into the area.
Where's parking?
Pardon me?
Underground? The parking. Right now.
Parking, well, several
Is it
places.
underground?
One, all the streets will
street
have
parking.
parking.
I see.
Okay, that's
Street
one that's generally more for guests and visitors. There is residential parking for residents.
Is it like one
in
per
each
one? One
it's
per
gen-
one
it's generally one per unit.
spot.
Yeah.
That's nice.
And I mean, I'll tell you that we did a survey around the Bay Area, including our own units, but we actually paid traffic consultants to go and look at PM, overnight traffic counts. And is it because millennials drive less, or I'm not sure, but people are parking at about 0.8. So there's a surplus of
Parking
parking
what?
at about 0.8 per unit.
Oh.
That's actual utilization.
Yeah, another one downtown. The service was I think it's 0.65 or.
Yeah. So we're doing 1-to-1
Yeah.
in most of our projects, or like 0.99 or something, and we're not seeing all of it being used.
It's mostly residential and retail. There's no office component.
There's no office component per se, although some of the ground floor retail, you can open up a realtor's office or an architect's office or a photography shop, or but it's not an office building. It's again, picture your typical street frontage. Is it Rockridge?
Like Main Street.
Yeah, like Main Street, XYZ, anywheresville, and you're gonna have a coffee shop, a dry cleaner, a restaurant, a clothing shop, an architect's office, a realty office, a title company, a bank. So there'll be those types of uses here. Mostly it'll be on Main Street there, or Brooklyn Basin Way, but we think secondarily it'll be focused along the waterfront and the park. So we kind of see a kind of a T in terms of how the retail will manifest itself, and that's how we've tried to program it. So for instance, we have a little bit of retail on the front of this building, Orion.
Any plans to keep the homeless away?
Yeah. Yeah, those tents.
Well, agreed, and someday